Have you ever stopped to think about your computer? I mean, really think about it? Underneath that slick case, it's just a collection of powerful but kind of lifeless parts. It's like a brain with no mind. So what's the secret sauce? What's the magic that turns that box of metal into the amazing tool you use every single day? Well, it needs a boss. And today, we're going to meet that boss.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll get properly introduced to this boss. Then we'll see how it's a master coordinator juggling everything your computer does. We'll check out how we actually interact with it, how it organizes all of our digital chaos, and finally, we'll pull back the curtain on that little miracle that happens every time you boot up your machine.
Okay, first things first, let's meet the invisible manager, the one that makes absolutely everything you do on your computer even possible.
So let's start with a really basic question. You've got all this incredible hardware, right? The super fast processor, the memory, the storage, but by themselves, they do, well, nothing. They're like a world-class orchestra with no conductor. So what is that missing piece?
The answer, of course, is the operating system, or the OS. This right here is the critical piece of software that breathes life into the machine. You can think of it as the ultimate middleman, the bridge between you and the hardware, translating all your clicks and keystrokes into actual actions.
So really, the OS has three massive jobs on its plate. First, it has to manage all the physical hardware. Second, it's the gatekeeper that lets your applications, your web browser, your games, actually use that hardware. And third, it's a master juggler, constantly scheduling and coordinating every single task to make sure it all runs smoothly. And that juggling act, that is where the OS is a true genius. So let's dive a little deeper into how it pulls off being such a great coordinator.
Just think about it for a second. Right now, you might be browsing the web, listening to some music, and getting email notifications all at the same time. How is that possible? It's because of something called preemptive multitasking. Your OS is switching the processor's focus between tasks so incredibly fast, we're talking thousands of times a second, that it creates this perfect illusion that everything is happening at once. It's a pretty mind-blowing feat of coordination, really.
Now, what about memory? Well, think of your computer's RAM as your actual work desk. It's limited in size, but anything on it is right there, super fast access. But what happens when your desk gets full? The OS cleverly uses a chunk of your hard drive as virtual memory. And you can think of that like a huge library basement. It can store way more stuff, but it takes a lot longer to go down there and grab what you need.
And that brings us to a problem you've almost certainly felt. Your computer slowing down to a crawl. If the OS has to keep running down to that library basement over and over and over, it gets completely bogged down. This is called thrashing. The computer spends all its energy just moving data back and forth instead of doing actual work. It's exactly why adding more RAM, basically getting a bigger desk, can make an old computer feel brand new again.
The OS is also kind of like a universal translator. You know that magic moment when you plug in a new mouse or a printer and it just works? That's not magic. That's the OS using a tiny piece of software called a device driver to instantly learn how to speak the language of that new device. That plug-and-play feature is the reason you don't need a computer science degree just to hook up a new pair of headphones.
So the OS is doing all this crazy complex stuff behind the scenes. But how do we, the users, actually talk to it? Well, that brings us to the face of the machine. Way back in the day, you had to speak the computer's language. You used a command-driven interface where you had to type out precise text commands for everything. Super powerful, for sure, but not exactly friendly. What we have today is a graphical user interface, or a GUI. We click on icons, we drag windows around, we use menus. It's all visual, it's intuitive, and it's a huge reason why computers are for everyone now.
And you can see just how dominant the GUI is when you look at the landscape today. Doesn't matter if it's Windows, macOS, Linux, or even on your phone with iOS and Android, they're all built around this visual click and drag experience. It's become the universal language for how we talk to our tech.
So besides managing all the parts and giving us a pretty face to look at, the OS has another massive job, saving our digital lives from becoming total chaos. It's the ultimate digital librarian.
The way it organizes everything is with a clear hierarchy of drives, folders, and files. Honestly, the easiest way to think about a file path is to see it like a postal address. It gives the computer the exact location of a piece of data, starting from the main street, the C drive, and guiding it through each neighborhood and house number until it gets right to the specific file's front door.
But how does the OS know what to do with a file once it finds it?
Simple. It looks at the file extension, that little bit at the end of the name. A .docx tells the OS, hey, open this with Microsoft Word. A .jpeg says you'll need an image viewer for this one. It's a simple but absolutely brilliant system for pairing up the right data with the right app.
And finally, let's talk about the very first thing your OS does every single day, waking up the computer. It seems so simple, right? You push a button and it turns on, but underneath, there's this carefully choreographed dance happening every time.
This is what we call the boot process. First, the BIOS, the computer's most fundamental software, wakes up the hardware. Then it runs a quick self-test, the post, to make sure all the important stuff is working. After it gets the all clear, it finds the operating system on your hard drive and loads its core, the kernel, into RAM. And finally, it loads up all your personal settings and startup programs, and poof, there's your familiar desktop.
And that whole sequence, from a dead stop to a fully working computer, is managed from start to finish by the operating system. It's one of its most important and probably most overlooked jobs. It just works every single time.
So, when you boil it all down, that's really what the operating system is. It's the unsung hero. It's the conductor of this incredible digital orchestra that you never actually see, but whose beautiful music you get to enjoy every single day. And the OS's job as a manager doesn't just stop there. It actually comes with a built-in toolkit to keep your computer healthy and happy. You've got things like disk cleanup to free up space, system restore to go back in time and fix problems, and even accessibility tools, all part of the package, reinforcing its role as the complete caretaker of your machine. Which leaves us with one last really interesting thought to chew on. We've gone from typing commands to clicking on icons. Now we're talking to our devices and having AI predict what we need. So the big question is, what's next? What will the operating system of the future look like? What will be the new face of the machine?